The following program is suitable for all ages.
Buffone. A certain magic will always linger with the very name. It speaks of courage and fervor in the world's most brutal game. 55, worn by Doug Buffone, a Chicago Bear through and through. He demanded excellence of himself and anyone wearing navy blue.
You tell me what's going on. This is moronic. We're going to get our whipped all the way down the line. I want somebody to get kicked in the and get out there and play. You're getting paid to play this game. I'm playing right. I don't mind you getting beat. I got my whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me. You are a professional team. Act like one, for God's sakes.
Football fans, this is Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, the fastest-paced podcast dedicated to analyzing the monsters of the Midway. Welcome, Barflies, Bear fans, hey, maybe even some Broncos fans. I'm your host, John Buffone, and we're coming to you live on Tuesday night, September 10th. Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann, a writer for SB Nation's Mile High Report, is our guest, and she will join us a little bit later. But first, I want to welcome back my producer and moderator, Alyssa Barbieri, who was unable to join us last week because of that pesky Hurricane Dorian. Alyssa, glad you're back. How are you and your loved ones doing?
We're doing much better. We got super lucky. That hurricane skirted us, so I was able to obviously watch that atrocious season opener. But, you know, I'm back and I'm ready to do this.
Excellent. I'm ready to go, too. Let's jump right into it.
So, John, let me prove you that I haven't forgotten how our show works. So we begin and end the show with 5 questions that you have 55 seconds to respond to. That's John's way of dedicating Buffone 55 to Doug Buffone, his uncle, who played 15 seasons for the Chicago Bears and wore number 55. So, John, let's get the first 5 in the book, and then we'll bring in Laurie.
Sounds good.
So it's been 5 days since the Chicago Bears faced the Green Bay Packers and delivered one of the biggest disappointments ever for Bears fans. What was the worst thing that contributed to the defeat? Was it the offensive line's lack of protection, Mitch Trubisky's inability to find open receivers, Matt Nagy's play calling, or did you detect something more disappointing than any of those factors? Your 55 seconds begin now.
Look, I'm not going to pinpoint one thing because that was a full team effort to crap their pants on live television. They couldn't block. The quarterback couldn't hit a bull in the ass with a banjo. You couldn't, or should I say, wouldn't run the ball, which brings me to the play calling. What was the game plan? Was there a game plan? I said this after the game was over. I felt sick to my stomach for that defense. They were getting no time to rest. Their tongues were hanging out of their mouth. They still held Aaron Rodgers to 10 points and sacked him 5 times. I'll tell you one thing, though. They can't keep doing that. If you keep trotting your defense out there like that, they're going to get tired. And what can happen when you're playing a violent game tired? You can get hurt. And it's just a law of probability that if the defense is out there more, there's more chances that they're going to get hurt. So all of a sudden, the biggest strength of the team starts to get decimated, and you aren't losing 10-3, you're losing 25-3, 30-3, so on and so forth. Now, I know that's kind of a doomsday scenario, and I don't want to look at it like that, but I don't want to map the whole season out, but man, that was hard to watch. The defense deserved to win that game.
I could not agree more. So speaking of that defense, we know that the defense picked up right where they left off last season. Is there any one player that you want to single out for his performance? You've got 55 seconds.
I was going to say Roy Robertson-Harris because that dude was a force inside. 3 tackles and a sack, and he was disruptive. The guy's 26 years old, playing for a new contract. Hopefully he gets it. Hopefully it's in Chicago. But I'm going to say Leonard Floyd. A guy may be playing for an extension. How about Leonard Floyd? Maybe the best game I've seen him play. 4 tackles, 2 sacks, and if this is what Leonard Floyd can be fully healthy, Bears fans are going to be pretty happy. He showed an aggressive bull rush at one point. Leonard Floyd using brute force. I love it. I said it last year. Having Khalil Mack is a blessing in many ways, including taking the pressure off of Leonard Floyd to be the guy. Before Mack, some people had astronomical expectations for Leonard Floyd, and then Mack comes in, and that pressure's alleviated. So maybe, just maybe, this freshly turned 27-year-old is finding his groove. He had 7 sacks his rookie year, and then 4.5, and then 4 after that. He already has 2. So if, and that's a monumental if he can stay healthy, this could be Leonard Floyd's best statistical year to date.
So speaking about another one of Ryan Pace's draft picks, back to Trubisky. In mid-July, The Athletic surveyed 55 NFL coaches and executives, asking them to rank by tiers all of the starting quarterbacks. Trubisky came in at the third tier with Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr, Andy Dalton, and Marcus Mariota. In the fourth are players like Josh Allen and Ryan Fitzpatrick. What's your concern level that Trubisky could sink to their ranks? You got 55 seconds.
I'm going to be honest. I don't give a crap about coach rankings, executive rankings, media rankings, or any other BS rankings that have no effect on anything. My concern is that the quarterback of the Chicago Bears played miserably against the Packers in Week 1. He looked like he was a one-read quarterback all night. When other receivers were open, he was locked in on his first read. He was missing throws and looked like he maybe didn't have the best grasp on the offense. That being said, I'm not damning Trubisky into the depths of Rex Grossman, Cade McNown, or we'll say Craig Krenzel. It's one game, and I don't think the play calling really helped him out either. But like I said last week, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. You don't stand still in the NFL, and Mitch needs to take the reins and run this offense the way we've heard he's able to run this offense. The last thing Bears fans want is for Mitch to turn into Tony Eason or Todd Blackledge. Why do I bring up those names? Those were the other guys that were drafted in 1983 in the first round with John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino. And we already see Patrick Mahomes with an MVP and Deshaun Watson doing his thing on Monday Night Football the other night. We don't want Mr. Trubisky to turn into the other guy.
And so moving on to question number 4, obviously Matt Nagy decided to rest his starters. So do you think that decision to rest his starters throughout all of the 4 preseason games backfired on him? 55 seconds, start now.
Listen, it would be really convenient for me to play Captain Hindsight in this scenario. And although I do support and still support keeping your guys healthy, if Mitch Trubisky truly was rusty all game and not used to game speed, well, something needs to change in preparing for the season then. The guy who needs it the least in the entire NFL, I'm talking about Tom Brady, he played in a preseason game. So while some of the other physical positions may benefit from not playing, even if you have an inkling that your quarterback might struggle in Week 1, then maybe some reps wouldn't be terrible. Well, like I said last week, I assume they're simulating game situations and, bringing people up to game speed in practice. But maybe there's a bigger difference than I thought. Maybe I'm missing something in all of this. But if I'm a Bears fan, I'm hoping it's rust. I'm hoping that wasn't a fully functional Mitch Trubisky. I'm hoping that a lot of it had to do with play calling, because that's sure as hell not going to get it done. So if I look over this, I'm hoping that this was just a blip and not a trend.
And final question, and then you can bring Laurie in. Where are you in this booing issue that's popped up? For those of you that don't know, All-Pro safety Eddie Jackson said that it was, quote, unacceptable for the Soldier Field crowd to boo Mitch Trubisky and the offense. He never heard it in Alabama, where he played college football, and he thinks it in no way helps a team win games, and that's what fans should do. Take 55 seconds and no more.
I'm going to need more than 55 seconds. Look, I love Eddie Jackson, but in his 4 years at Alabama, the Crimson Tide lost 1 home game, so there really wasn't an opportunity for the home fans to ever boo. I'm not a big booer myself, but you know what? I get it. If you watch the Seattle-Cincy game over the weekend, Seattle fans, long regarded as the 12th man and some of the best fans in the league, were booing the offensive play calling because they were constantly running into a brick wall and expecting different outcomes. I think the booing came from a deep place in Chicago. For 8 months, Bears fans endured the sting of the double doink. You look over this team and think they're about to take a step forward on the offensive side of the ball. Mitch is in year 3, second year with Matt Nagy. They're going to come out on fire. It's the start of the 100th season. You're on national TV against Green Bay. Everyone thinks the Bears are a prime candidate for a regression year, and all you want to do is prove them wrong, and the defense comes out on fire. And then that's what you're offered offensively? It's like waiting for Christmas morning, and instead of getting an Xbox, Santa slid down the chimney, stole your wallet, and bounced. The booing was a culmination of just an utter letdown across the board. I'm not necessarily defending it because Eddie Jackson's right. I mean, booing's never going to solve anything. Nagy's not going to hear the boos and then run up to Section 3G and ask Stan Polinsky, who from Urbana, who's wearing a faded Bernard Berrien jersey, what play he should be calling. But in a way, I understand it, and I hope the situation doesn't present itself again. That being said, I would like to welcome in Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann, writer for SB Nation's Mile High Report. Laurie, welcome to the show. Before we even jump into anything, let's get a couple things out of the way before we talk Broncos. Besides writing for the Mile High Report, you are an adjunct professor teaching primarily advanced media writing and public relation courses at the College of Charleston. So, from a teacher standpoint, how'd you grade my responses so far?
I give you an A+. I especially I especially like how fast you can talk. That's impressive.
That is from 3 years of seasoning. This is our third season, so I've turned into a mini auctioneer, if you will. So it's an acquired skill. Secondly, I want to talk about a op-ed you wrote in 2014 in the Denver Post titled "Dear Mr. Manning." You addressed the future Hall of Famer about his legacy. Can you kind of summarize what you wrote, because it's a post that kind of already has a legacy of its own. I read over it today. Very impressive stuff. Can you kind of let our listeners know what that's all about, and so they can check it out?
Well, if you recall the 2014 Super Bowl where the Broncos lost 43-8 to the Seahawks, not a good showing, a bad reckoning afterwards, and we were listening to pundit after pundit after pundit talk about whether Peyton Manning's legacy as a quarterback was now tarnished because he had such a poor showing in the Super Bowl. He only had one trophy, blah, 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 blah. So being a diehard fan I am, and knowing that I had plenty of company with many other fans, I wrote basically an open letter to Peyton Manning telling him that his legacy was not tarnished because his legacy went far beyond just winning championships. And as it turned out, I kind of hit a chord with, hundreds of thousands of Broncos fans who were reeling from the loss and needing some other fans to commiserate with, I think.
Well, it's an awesome op-ed. I encourage all of the Barroom listeners to Google "Dear Mr. Manning." They're going to find that post. It's a great read, so I encourage everybody to Google that up, obviously after the show.
You.
But let's jump right into the current state of the Broncos. Last night, the Broncos on the road, they fall to the Raiders 24-16. On your morning after post on the Mile High Report, you wrote, "In Vic Fangio's head coaching debut, the old school coach who preaches not dying by inches just went into the black hole and died by 12,852 of them." What did you mean by that?
Well, I'm curious if he ever used the death by inches mantra with Bears fans. But when he came to Denver back in February, he mentioned that one of the things he was really going to be big on was taking care of the little things, making sure you pay attention to the details so that little mistakes here and there don't add up to something big. And he has really been awesome all off season to listen to kind of get behind and watch him develop into his role as a head coach for the first time. And so we go to this game with honestly just super high expectations, not necessarily like Broncos are going to win the Super Bowl expectations, but we're going to be a much better team. We're going to be a disciplined team. We're going to be a prepared team. And we came out and it looked like the worst of 2017 and 2018 in so many ways. It was so disappointing, and it felt like, it wasn't even just inches. It was massive yards. And that number, by the way, wasn't completely random. I basically just took the offensive yards that the Raiders had gotten, figuring that, they were able to score points with those yards and our defense couldn't do anything with those yards. And I multiplied that by 36 inches. And so that number is 357 yards of offense that the Broncos could do nothing with.
Well, you say you don't know if he preached death by inches here. Bears we don't have death by inches. We have death by doinks. That's kind of how it works in Chicago right now. But sticking with Fangio, you complimented him throughout the preseason because he's preached fundamental football. In Chicago and in San Francisco, and as a defensive coordinator, he did the same. Are you concerned that the roster is kind of resistant to old school football? We see this from time to time where guys who come from a different era are trying to talk to these guys who are in their early 20s, and maybe the styles and the cultures just don't jive.
I don't think so. I mean, I certainly, prior to last night, I would have said no way. They've all bought in. They've certainly said as much in their off-season pressers, which is always a little iffy anyway. A lot of that is player speak, coach speak, whatever. But, they definitely, it seemed like they understood what Vic was doing. They didn't always like everything, like no music at practice or whatever, but nobody seemed, the locker room seemed really behind him and definitely very cohesive and, feeling like this is the coach and his ideas and his defense are really going to kind of put our defense over the top again, and we're going to be able to assemble an efficient offense because we've got Rich Scangarello and Vic is going to let him do his thing and blah, 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 blah. And then it was just so flat. I mean, they opened with crazy plays that didn't work. The defense just watched the Raiders march down the field. And, our corners couldn't cover anybody. So my concern is not that players are buying into Vic Fangio's mantra and to his approach. My concern is that the Broncos don't actually have the personnel on defense to handle the traditional Vic Fangio defense, the one that we've been, raving over for months. That we've had Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, and we have Chris Harris Jr. We just needed a coach to really make the scheme, fit with such athletic, talented players. And it turns out we have 3 athletic, talented players, and we have a great defensive line. But our secondary is depleted by injury, seemed really weak once again, and that was definitely hard to watch. And it just looked like a couple of them were lost and confused. And Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, I mean, where were they? Nowhere. So what we thought were the strengths of our defense didn't show up at all. And so I'm a little more concerned that we just don't have enough of the strong players that you guys had in Chicago or that he had in San Francisco when he assembled those really good defenses.
We're talking to Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann, writer for SB Nation's Mile High Report. Laurie, we're talking about Vic Fangio, who is preaching fundamentals, but some fundamental errors occurred in that game, like catching the football. Joe Flacco threw a perfect pass to Deshaun Hamilton in the end zone that zipped past his hands, hit him in the chest, and it fell incomplete. Flacco finished 21 of 31 for 268 yards, a touchdown, no picks. Why is he not getting more love from the Denver media? Are they just kind of waiting for the other foot to fall, or is it just that he's not a sexy enough name?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a little bit of time for Broncos fans to feel okay about accepting Joe Flacco. He's still, I think to many people, kind of we like to make fun of him being elite, and mostly we like to point to the playoff game where he beat us and we hate him. So I think having him on our team now took a little getting used to. And it's different than a Peyton Manning, where Broncos fans were the same way back in 2012. Manning had beaten us over and over and over again as a Colt, and a lot of fans did not want him here. But he came in, and then he was amazing, and he won. So it's like, yeah, okay, we kind of like that guy. Joe Flacco, he's not the same demeanor. He's definitely no Peyton Manning, but he's an efficient enough quarterback. I think he doesn't have, flashy pizzazz. So I don't think people are they're like not really accepting him. I think they're kind of warming up to Joe Flacco, but unless he starts throwing lots of touchdowns, they're not going to really be excited about him, because we have now been beaten to death with terrible quarterbacking, terrible offenses for 3 years, and we're just gun shy. So we need him to come out and be on fire before we're going to say Joe Flacco's our guy.
Talking about sexy Joe Flacco with Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann, writer for SB Nation's Mile High Report. Some of the guys that sexy Flacco's throwing to, Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders, they look pretty good. Sutton, a second-year player, only 23 years old, caught 7 passes for $120. 32-year-old Sanders had 5 catches, one of which was a touchdown. This looks like it could be kind of a dynamic duo. What are the expectations in Denver for these two?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the real positives of the game. And Emmanuel Sanders, we know he's amazing. He's been he's been our clutch player for years. He was amazing with Peyton Manning, but then he was the one guy with our quarterback carousel these last few years who could actually catch a pass and do something with it. So it's not a surprise to see him in this role again. But given that he just came off an Achilles injury, and that he's actually back a little earlier than expected, and that he's already back to regular Emmanuel Sanders form, is very encouraging, because it was really obvious last year when he went out with an injury and we suddenly had two rookies who were forced into a wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 role, that they really weren't ready for that. It's different to be a rookie and be contributing, and it's different than when you have to be a starter. And so we knew we would need him. What's really good is to see Cortland Sutton show some real improvement, show some maturity, and, kind of adding to his route tree and being able to develop quite a bit of chemistry already with Joe Flacco. So that one actually has me very encouraged. Flacco and Sanders, I actually expected. So I just need to have both of those guys continue to do what they do.
Let's stick with the offensive side of the ball. The Broncos running backs rushed for over 4 yards a carry against Oakland. The team's new offensive coordinator, they've installed a zone blocking scheme based on what you saw Monday night. Is there reason to be encouraged that the Broncos can put together a strong rushing attack with all those running backs?
It took a while to get started, for sure. I mean, the first half was a kind of a disaster with the offensive line, and the running backs were doing a little bit, but they really actually got some rhythm in the second half. And so I think we saw what we were hoping to see from Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. Both of those guys can be explosive in different ways and can be really good. And they actually did great. It was really, we moved the ball, they ran the ball well, they had big yardage, they got first downs, but then when we got into the red zone, we either had a mistake or we just couldn't, or we had a bad play call, and that pushed us back, so we couldn't take advantage of the work they had done. But I was encouraged to see the offensive line block better for the running game in the second half. I would say probably one of my biggest concerns for this team is the offensive line, especially after today's news. We had some injury news, and we don't have enough players to have any injuries on that line.
Yeah, and kind of diving right into that, pass blocking seems to be another issue, and it's not like Joe Flacco is the most fleet of feet. So he's kind of a statue back there. Can you give us an overview of the offensive line, their new offensive line coach, Mike Munchak, who, incidentally, as you probably know, is the 5th offensive line coach in 5 years. What's the outlook with the line as far as pass blocking and keeping Flacco upright?
This is another thing where we had really high hopes for Mike Munchak, as Hall of Fame offensive lineman. Probably a very unfair expectation that he's going to come in and just work magic with these, the sort of haphazard Band-Aid kind of offensive line that we have, and they're going to be amazing. And of course that didn't really happen, but part of it has just been injuries. We had Ron Leary back last night. He hasn't played all preseason because of coming back from an Achilles injury that he suffered last year in training camp. So he's back, but this is his first game, and he looked rough. He did not look, and part of that is probably just being back into football shape. But Jawan James, who we acquired in free agency, we were really looking forward to having him help solidify the line, and he went down with an injury, and he's having an MRI, and it looks like he's going to be out, and it's possible it's going to be. I don't know about season ending, but it's definitely going to keep him out for several weeks. So that is not good news. Garrett Bowles is our third-year former first-round draft pick who has just every year struggled to be the player we need him to be, mostly because he gets penalties like you catch a cold. It's constant. So he's been a little better, but he's not a great blocker. We're hoping Mike Munchak can help him figure this out, because you don't want to say you wasted a first-round draft pick, but it's starting to look that way. Dalton Reisner, who is our rookie, he probably looks the best on the line, and he's our rookie, but he's healthy and he's learning the pro ranks there, and he had a nice block last night that really helped Phillip Lindsay get some big yards. So there's hope for him. And our center, Connor McGovern, he's not really a true center. He came into that role last year when Matt Paradise went down with an injury, and then we traded Paradise. So we have a guy who's not in his most natural position, but he's learning the position. So it's a patchwork, and we don't have depth. We have we have one guy who is listed 3 times as the second guy on the depth chart. So he's
Good.
kind of our most important. Yeah, Elijah Wilkinson. He came into the game when I believe when Juwan James or maybe Ron Leary went down, and he didn't do so hot. So your defensive front, for example, should have a field day on Sunday.
Bears fans love hearing that. We are talking to Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann, writer for SB Nation's Mile High Report. Hey, what's the deal with the tight end position in Denver? The box score shows Noah Fant being the only one to catch a pass, 2 for 29 yards. But he's also had some problems, and I would like to follow up with who backs up Fant, because if anyone knows lack of depth at tight end, it's Bears fans. But I'm interested to know what's going on in Denver.
Well, we have our biggest issue then is injuries. We have several tight ends on the roster, but Jeff Hireman he just has some minor soreness, I think, an injury. Frankly, I'm a little shocked he wasn't listed as the starter, because he played in preseason, but just I think they've been holding him out, protecting him. Noah Fant was going to be second, and then Troy Fumagalli is third, but Troy Fumagalli's third really because Jake Butt had been was supposed to be third and went down with his third knee injury, or actually I should say he had a third knee injury earlier this year, but he was having some complications and had to get a very minor surgery related to that. So he's out for a few weeks, and we placed him on IR. So it's just a depleted group. Noah Fant is about the only one who's healthy, fully healthy. The other guys are working their way back into full health from some minor injuries.
I'm going to switch gears and go back to the defensive side of the ball. We talked about the disappearance of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. The defense allowed touchdown drives of 72, 95, and 60. I guess part of the problem was the lack of pass rush, was seemingly would be a team's strength. But Derek Carr, his uniform was basically clean all night. How in the world did the Raiders contain Von Miller and Bradley Chubb?
Well, a big part of it was how quickly Derek Carr got rid of the ball. I mean, there was some stat on Twitter that he was one of the 3 fastest QBs this weekend in terms of getting the ball out, 2.3 seconds or something. So that certainly helped, because we had Colton Miller and Trent Williams who were pretty good at least slowing down Miller and Chubb. And I think our coverage, occasionally they dropped Miller and Chubb into coverage, so they weren't always rushing the passer, but it was highly disappointing. I mean, not a single QB hit on the day. That's that, even as quick as Carr was, that just shouldn't happen. So, and we have a good defensive front, really. So I think, Chubb and Miller just, they couldn't get there fast enough, and part of it too was our secondary was weak, and so Carr could make that 2-second pass read because he had open guys, or he had one-on-one, and he knew he could beat, his receiver was going to be able to beat our corner, and that happened all night.
What a segue that is. You wrote that second-year cornerback Isaac Yiadom. I don't know if I said that right, because Aldo gave me absolutely no help going into the show about how to say his name. But tell us what happened.
It was ingrammatically correct.
It was ingrammatically. Yeah, that's an inside joke. But just so you know, everybody at the ballroom, Aldo can't talk. Let's give us a better understanding of what's happening with that defensive backfield. Any news on former Bears slot corner Bryce Callahan? That's a name that Bears fans are quite familiar with.
Yeah, well, we would love to know what's going on with Bryce Callahan, quite honestly. I mean, we were excited to get him, looking forward to actually shoring up our cornerback depth and our secondary, and having somebody on the other side of Chris Harris Jr. that would really help compete, so other teams wouldn't, they just throw away from Chris Harris Jr. because they know how good he is. So all last season, whoever was playing, which was generally Bradley Roby, just got hammered and targeted all night and usually lost the battle. So Callahan still has, I think he's still dealing with complications from the foot injury. And frankly, they haven't told us much. Even the coach today said they don't, it looks like he could play Sunday, but they really don't know. And then Fangio followed up with, but we said that last week too. So it's really up in the air. So I don't know, but we needed him, and I'm really disappointed that he has been out with an injury because it really showed up last night. Isaac Yiadom, he actually played great in preseason. He looked like he had kind of turned a corner, that he'd figured out the position a little better, made that leap that you make to really being in a pro defense. And he was behind the ball. He was slow. Maybe it kind of a little tight in his hips and can't swivel enough to turn and keep up with those guys. But he was just a step behind all the way.
Let's talk about everybody's favorite aspect of football, special teams. The announcers kept talking about how poorly the Broncos special teams has been throughout the last few years. Can you kind of give us the Mile High report on that unit, and are they as bad as advertised?
I think when you allow a 72-yard run back, I think they are. Early in the game, I was a little encouraged because we had a couple of nice stops. Pinned them back a little bit, so it wasn't anything fantastic, but it was good. And that's honestly, as Broncos fans, we would just be thrilled with them to catch the ball and not lose it and not run backwards, when they're the ones fielding the punts, and then when they're covering to be able to, keep their assignments, stay in their lane and contain the guys rather than letting them slice and dice them all the way up the field, which happens way too much to us. Seems like it really doesn't happen to other people very often, but again, happened last night. So it was very discouraging. We even have, we have a new guy that we just got off of waivers. He wasn't with us all preseason, fielding kicks. So that tells you a little bit about how our preseason went with special teams, and it looks like our regular season might go the same way.
Sounds promising. We're talking to Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann, writer for SB Nation.
Are you guys excited about Sunday yet? You probably
I'll be honest. You're increasing my confidence level, and I think I'm going to have you on every week just because to talk about how bad the Broncos are. Last question from me before I throw you into the chat room, and Alyssa will take care of you there. Finish this sentence for me. The Broncos will beat the Bears on Sunday if. Go ahead.
Von Miller and Bradley Chubb get to Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, and that seems to be we can see what happens in week one whenever there's a little bit of pressure. Sometimes Mitch seemed a little locked in on one read there, but we're hoping that changes pace. Alyssa, you've been interacting with everybody in the chat room. You got some questions for Laurie?
I do. I have 4 questions. Hello, Laurie. So Dad wants to know, Laurie, your expectation for the Broncos offense against the Bears defense. Should they have a body bag on site for Flacco?
Seriously, literally before yesterday's game, I would have said it'll be tough, but Flacco will be able. We have good running backs and we have some good receivers, so we'll be okay. But I'm really worried about our offensive line. So I think at least one body bag would be a good idea.
And so Ryan wants to know, what do you think the Broncos will try to do to counter the Bears' pass rush?
Yeah, well, hold them. That's probably what they'll do, and we'll get penalties. So I think that's going to be my serious answer would actually be that Joe Flacco can get the ball up pretty quickly. Hopefully, we will try. We won't try to be too cute. I don't know if you guys watched our offense, but when your very first play of the game is an end around to a tight end who's a rookie, and you're at an away game and you're already behind, like, what kind of play call is that? I need John to do a little mantra for the Broncos the same way he did for the Bears, because it was pathetic. And play calling like that on Sunday will kill us. So just doing the things that doing some play action and getting the ball out quickly to some short slants and getting to our tight end, hopefully, and to even our running backs, I think would be the best way to try and not always try to look down and wait for the deep pass, even though Flacco likes the deep play.
So the Broncos are pretty hard to beat at home in September. So what can you tell us about the altitude at Mile High? How much of an advantage do you sense that it is for the home team? And have you ever seen or heard of a visiting team doing something innovative to counter that altitude advantage?
First, I do think it's an advantage for sure. But don't tell the Bears that. They should show up on Sunday morning. It won't be a big deal. Just go play the game. They'll be fine. But they do need to stay hydrated, and it wears you out quickly. So I think the main thing teams do is they just get there and try to get acclimated and drink a lot of water. But if it were me, I'd get myself an altitude tent, and I'd be sleeping in it every night this week. I could deal with that when I got there.
Well, that sounds fun.
Hopefully they do that. And I have one last one before you go. So Harp wants to know, how the hell are you being from South Carolina, a Broncos and a Cubs fan?
It's a long story, but I was born, honestly, I was born in Wisconsin, but we won't talk about that.
Ew.
And we moved, I was a baby, we moved to Colorado. I grew up a Broncos fan, and it was before the Rockies. There were no Rockies at the time. And my parents, my mom is from Chicago, and so she was a Cubs fan. My dad is from Texas, but when he was growing up, the Cubs were on WGN far more than any Texas team. So he was a Cubs fan as a kid. So growing up, I was a Broncos fan and a Cubs fan.
And that's something. I mean, WGN strikes again. Laurie, I want to thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on Buffone 55. Before we kick you out of here, can you tell our audience where they can find your work and they can interact with you on social media?
You can find my work at milehighReport.com. That's the SB Nation Broncos site. And you can find me on Twitter at DocLLV, which is DOCLLV.
All right, Laurie, if the Bears lose 6 in a row, we're going to bring you back just so you can make us feel better about how bad the Broncos are. Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann, writer for SB Nation's Mile High Report. Laurie, thank you so much, and we'll be talking to you down the road. Thanks again.
All right.
Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks.
Dawn, that music signifies one thing. It is time for the second half of our B55 question. So let's get right down to it.
Let's
John, while we traditionally do 5, I'd like to go to OT here, so be prepared.
Oh, goody.
So Aaron Lynch of the Bears, who played 3 seasons for Vic Fangio, said this about his former coach. I know deep down he's really looking forward to this game. Question is, how much is he looking forward to scheming against Mitch Trubisky and Matt Nagy, given what he knows of these two? Do you think we're facing a meeting of the minds with these two coaches? And do you feel he has a huge advantage facing Trubisky? You've got 55 picks.
Well, I'm sure he's looking forward to it for a number of reasons. I'm sure at some point he thought he could be the head coach of the Chicago Bears, and obviously he was retained as a coordinator when Nagy came in. I'm sure he's anxious to show his former team that he can be successful as a head coach and wants to make Chicago miss him, although I don't think Vic's in any way spiteful. But if you look at this matchup, Vic should have some serious advantages. He saw this offense every day. He knows Mitch's tendencies. He has a week of tape to go off of what we saw in Green Bay. If things hold even for week 1, the way these offenses are playing, this might be a 6-3 ball game. But, you know, Nagy got to see Fangio's defense every day, too, and they're still practicing against a defense that knows that system very well. So as much as everyone wants to give Fangio the nod here, let's not pretend that Nagy's going into this thing completely blind. These guys know each other very well. And I'm sure Nagy is just as juiced to not only match minds with Fangio, but is eager to show that last week was a blip, a mulligan opportunity, that the offense really isn't in tatters. He gets a real chance to prove that this week.
And so Raiders rookie running back Josh Jacobs ran the ball 23 times for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns last night in his debut. Bears rookie David Montgomery only had a total of 6 rushing attempts. That's 17 fewer attempts than Jacobs. How badly do you think Nagy needs to lean on Montgomery for a Bears win against a Broncos defense that could again be missing inside linebacker Todd Davis? The clock starts now.
A lot would be my answer. I said I wanted David Montgomery to steal the Packers' soul last week with long, sustaining drives. He carried the ball 6 damn times. They didn't even try to run the ball, so it's not even like they couldn't get anything going on the ground. They just abandoned it. What do you have this three-headed monster for if you're just going to let them collect splinters on their ass on the sidelines? Mitch isn't going to set up the run. The run is going to set up Mitch. Throwing the ball 46 times in a one-score game just ain't going to get it done. All this deception and design doesn't work if you can't run the ball down someone's throat every once in a while. I'm not saying go full-blown Dowell Loggins and go run, pass for 10 straight drives, but man, establish the line of scrimmage and demoralize a defense early by ripping off chunks of 4, 5, 6 yards. It makes it even more enticing if Davis isn't in there, but I don't care if Ray Lewis is on the other side of the field. Go get your road graders and hyperdrive and blow their asses off the line. That's what this is. So whenever they're creeping up, you can get a sneaky wheel route with Tariq Cohen or go to one of the other playmakers. Establish the run and then break some backs.
And so Derek Carr was 22 of 26 for 259 yards and a touchdown pass against Fangio's defense. A very efficient game. So Trubisky now has 2 straight games where he's been inefficient. Last week versus the Packers and the playoff game against the Eagles. Where is your confidence level at that Mitch can have a David Carr type of game against the Broncos, and why? You are on the clock.
I mean, I'm confident he can. We've seen Mitch have those kinds of games before. We've seen him have better games than that before. I'm not going off of any tangible data here, but I think we might see the pocket move a little bit more this week. Mitch is accurate when he's rolling out. He's also pretty accurate when he's on the run. So maybe he needs that movement to get into a rhythm or see the whole field. I know it's not exactly going out on a limb to say Trubisky's going to play better this week because I can't imagine him playing worse, but I think they're going to go over the film meticulously this week, and I do think Mitch has a good football IQ. I think we've seen him make some crazy accurate passes. The problem is we've seen it in waves, and then things settle down or bottom out. I don't know if this is a great opportunity for Mitch to get back on track because it's going against a dangerous defense with Chubb and Von Miller on the other side, but maybe this is a good barometer to find out where the offense is. The Broncos showed some vulnerability in the deep pass, so maybe there's something that we see there a few times. I don't know if we plan the season out according to this game. You can't do it with one game. You probably shouldn't do it with 2 games. But if we see the same thing we saw last week, that's when a blip turns into a trend.
So on Monday night, Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders had a combined 206 receiving yards, and they could have had many more yards if Joe Flacco had spotted them running open. What does your gut say about these 2 wideouts against the Bears defense? And can Joe Flacco can he actually have a better game against the Bears defense given Fangio's familiarity with them? You have 55 seconds.
Well, Sutton and Sanders had solid games, but it really didn't translate into a ton of points either. So let's not get it twisted. Joe Flacco is not Aaron Rodgers. Some of those high-pressure plays where Rodgers can escape and get the ball out and turn a sack into a 5-yard gain, I'm not so sure Flacco is the same kind of escape artist or magician. He's tall, he's big, he's kind of like a statue back there. I think the Bears are great at getting pressure up the middle, and obviously Khalil Mack coming around the edge. As we've seen in the past, and in the words of the great Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So if they get to Flacco early, whatever they have scripted might not work out so well, and then everything else goes to hell. And chaos normally favors the defense. I really like the Bears' defense in this matchup, and we haven't really talked about them as much because we've been focusing on the offense, but that shows the confidence level that the fans, coaches, and players really have in the defense. This is a hyper-aggressive unit that Pagano is overseeing. And so much for that regression, huh? That didn't really work out like everybody said it was going to.
So before I get to my final question, John, we have 2 questions in the chat room for you I'd like to get in.
Sure.
So how do you feel about the lack of tight end depth and the impact that it will have on the Broncos game?
I mean, is that an underlying aspect that we didn't really talk about too much when it came to game script or play calling? That a lot of these things maybe hinged on Trey Burton being in there, or maybe him being maybe more of an asset on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe, and Adam Shaheen's not really that guy, and then Broniker would probably fill that H-back area or whatever. So it is concerning because we don't know what we're going to get from the tight end position week to week. We don't know if Burton's ever going to be fully healthy or if he's going to play or not play. Is Shaheen going to step up and be a red zone target, or does his back hurt? And is Bradley Soul, who's a former lineman, going to be the guy who's getting a lot of snaps at some point throughout the year? That is concerning, and I said it was concerning last week, and that concern only continues to grow as we're still not sure what's going on.
And Hart wants to know, who is Mitch's go-to guy, other than Montgomery getting some heavy carries and receiving yards? Who do you think is his go-to guy?
I think we saw his go-to guy was probably Allen Robinson last week. He was eyeing him down quite a bit, but also he missed Robinson on a couple routes as well. I think that Allen Robinson was brought in to be that guy. He was brought in to be a number one guy. We saw what he did in Jacksonville. I don't necessarily think that he's a security blanket, but I also think that Allen Robinson should be at least a 70 to 80 reception guy. You gotta be able to go to your number one receiver, and your number one receiver should put up good stats. But as far as a go-to guy, I mean, a safety blanket would always be Tariq Cohen, because he can turn anything out of nothing. So I don't know who his go-to guy is at this point, because if you watch the film, if you rewatch that game, who the hell is the go-to guy? Who was the guy that was going to step up and do something last week? I'm not sure, because the play calling really didn't, let us formulate any kind of opinion on that. So it's probably going to take another week before we figure out who the go-to guy is.
Okay, so last week, your pep talk to Eddie Pinheiro worked. He hit his first and only field goal attempt. So this week, we need you to get Mitch Trubisky on track. The clock is off. Give Mitch that famous Buffone boost.
Mitch, a lot of these talks involve me getting super intense, sometimes yelling, lathering myself up into a frenzy, hoping to inspire somebody to run through a brick wall. But I don't think you need that. I think you're an intense, passionate, fiery player already. And I believe that you absolutely want to be the best quarterback in the NFL. Those boos could not have felt good last week, am I right? But you should realize that the fans aren't booing because they want you out of town. They're booing because they want you and this team to succeed so badly. Chicago fans are so emotionally invested in the Bears, and they're so emotionally invested in you. It's like that old adage, just because I'm mad doesn't mean I don't care. You're the quarterback. You're the leader of this team, and the biggest attribute of a leader is how they handle adversity. And you already have plenty of that heading into week 2. Opposing players, media pundits, and fan bases outside of Chicago are already writing you off. But there is nothing quite as sweet as getting up off the mat and popping someone who's been running their mouth right in the face. You have all the help in the world around you, a world-class defense, exciting receivers, a reliable run game, which I imagine will be unwrapped this week. Just go out there and play the game, a game you've been playing all your life. Relax, man. Go be the quarterback of the Chicago Bears. Let it rip. Let your players make plays and go have fun. I know I'm probably not telling you anything you don't already know. But just go out and play to win. No need to get inside your own head too much. You're prepared. You're ready. Get off the mat, Mitch, and start swinging. Okay. Every week I give you my prediction to the game, and for this week my forecast is I think the defense has another great game. Wow. Hot take there. I think they actually generate a couple turnovers this week against Denver, though. I think they give some short fields to the offense. I think we see a better run game out of the Bears, or at least a run game out of the Bears. So I think Chicago should and will win this game by a score of 20. Yes, I think they'll score 20 points, 20-16. Once again, I want to thank Laurie Lattimore-Volkmann for being my guest tonight. Remember to follow me on Twitter at JDBuffone. Make sure you are following the Barroom at Bears Barroom, and on the Facebook page. Alyssa, tell our listeners where they can find your work and contact you on social media.
You can find my work over at bearswire.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Alyssa Barbieri. And I also want to tell those listening to us live on Mixler.com that in just a few minutes, we've got 2 more shows coming up. Fantasy Football Goon with Joe Mandel, who is also known as Joey Two Scoops, and Jonathan Tucci, a.k.a. The Tooch. They will welcome fantasy football legend Spaceball, and the 3 will get you prepped for week 2. That's followed by Shy Fans in the Stands with Greg Braggs and Joey Two Scoops. Their guest tonight is former Bears defensive lineman Corey Wooten. Those 2 shows, along with this one, will be available on podcast format. So make sure you subscribe to the Bears Barroom Radio Network.
That's right, and sign up on Mixler.com for email updates on all of our live shows. We'd love to have you in our chat room. It's all absolutely free to sign up for. We hope you join us live and interact with us. We love company, and if you listen to the podcast, please leave us a review. That helps us out immensely. But that will do it for this edition of Buffone 55. Thanks for stopping around. Enjoy the game, Barflies. We'll see you next week.